My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans. Hello and welcome back to Magis Talk. I'm your host Ian Peoples, and I'm joined by my friend, brother Jesuit, and co-host Dan Finucane.
And we are joined by a person in the middle who you probably recognize, Father Tom Greene. Father Greene spent a few years here in Belize not too long ago, and that was before he was named to the position of Provincial in the Central and Southern Province of the Jesuits, and we'll hear a little bit more about what that title and what that job entails. Father Greene, as you may know, but maybe not, is trained as a lawyer and practiced law in New Orleans, Louisiana, prior to becoming a Jesuit. And since being a Jesuit, he became a Jesuit 25 years ago, celebrating his 25th anniversary. Father Greene has held many posts, including U.S. Jesuit Conference Secretary for Social and International Ministries, and he was also Superior of the Jesuit community here in Belize.
Father Tom is not here in Belize for too long of a stay, so we're really grateful he's taken the time to be with us. So, Father Tom, welcome to Magis Talk.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Dan. Happy to be here. Good to be here.
And we understand that our show is probably one of the most popular shows among Jesuits in the U.S., right? You hear about that when you visit other Jesuits? Just how great of a job Dan and Ian are doing down in Belize?
That's right.
Yeah, they may not say it exactly like that, but that's sort of the impression I get.
No, it really is great to have you, and I know you're here for like a week, I think. So
right.
Yeah, and it's a packed schedule for Father Tom, visiting all of our communities here in Belize, like all the apostolic works we have. So lots of meetings, but hopefully this is more enjoyable maybe than. Well, I hope you enjoy all your meetings here.
Well, until he hears our difficult questions.
Yes, yeah, we got some real fiery questions with us today. Our first one is one we ask all of our guests, and it's basically just about your faith life growing up. What role did your faith play in your life, as a kid and teenager, and could you just give a little bit of your background?
Sure. Well, I had a Catholic upbringing. My mother and father are Catholic, and so I was raised Catholic. And, really the only education I know is Jesuit education. I went to a Jesuit grammar school, Jesuit high school, Jesuit university, Jesuit law school, and then, of course, as a Jesuit, all Jesuit schools. So I may not have been able to pass a course outside of a Jesuit school. We'll never know. But anyway, growing up, I'd say I had a typical upbringing. I would not consider myself I was not someone who really saw the priesthood as a young, and I think it's wonderful when people can, but as a high school student, thought never crossed my mind, but I just was sort of faithful to the sacraments and to, what I studied in class. But it really wasn't until much later in life that we'll come to, I guess, when I began to have more experiences of sort of living out my faith, not studying it as much, and not just in the context of prayer or the sacraments, that priesthood, religious life, vowed life began to take root in my heart.
Sure.
And, prior to joining the Jesuits, as we mentioned, you studied law and you were a lawyer. Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of law you practiced, and how you got interested in being a lawyer?
Sure. Yeah, I finished law undergrad. I transferred, actually. So I did go to a non-Jesuit school for a few years, and I transferred back to Loyola in New Orleans. And because of that, I had to take extra courses in the summer. So I finished my undergrad on a Friday. And I had been thinking about what I wanted to do next, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. My father said, well, you got to get a job, and which I understood, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then this idea said, well, what about go to law school? And I figured that would buy me a few more years. So I sort of signed up without this, lifelong desire to study law. I had two uncles who were attorneys, and I admired them, and I thought, well, this would be a good career. And I guess I had some inkling that it might be a good fit for me. So anyway, I went to law school, and there in New Orleans at Loyola. I finished law school, and I went to work for the DA's office. So I started my legal career as a prosecutor, as an assistant DA in New Orleans, and then moved into private practice. And not as much criminal law, a lot more civil litigation. And that was a pivotal time of my life because both, and I can come back to some of the experiences at the DA's office, but in the practice of civil law, I began to have all the things that I thought that I wanted. I had the salary that I wanted, actually more than I had ever thought I was worth or deserved, and I was given a lot of freedom in my practice early on by the law firm. So I had the relationship I wanted. I could see sort of my life playing out and where I would live and where our children would be going to school. And she was an incredible person. But as time went on, in my third year of practicing there, I began to feel like professionally things were doing this. Everything was going really well. And so from the outside looking in, I think people were like, wow, this is great. And I would play along with that and say, yeah, but interiorly, I couldn't quite figure it out. I just knew that the things that were supposed to fill me with joy were not. And so, as you would see your life playing out, that should fill you with hope and excitement, right? And making the journey with this other person. And it wasn't. And I couldn't figure it out because, like I said, everything seemingly was a great fit. So I decided that I would drive my car to Alaska. And when I got back to New Orleans, I would have my life figured out. That was before Google Maps, Ian. And
I don't know how you guys did it back then.
I literally had a road atlas in my car, and the ones that you've seen, like state by state, page by page.
Yeah,
and
They don't talk to you to tell you.
They don't.
They didn't know what page to go to.
So I didn't get the ruler out and add up all the miles, and so anyway, it's a long drive to Alaska. Let me put it that way. But after 3 days, I stopped in Wyoming, and as I said, I stopped for coffee and stayed for 2 years. So I stopped, and I got a job working at a school with emotionally disturbed, low-functioning children, and that was the beginning of sort of the transition from sort of my corporate legal world into a faith life. And it's just, amazing how broken people, these were special needs children, have a way of restoring our humanity. And suddenly I was making minimum wage because I wasn't working in a high-skilled job. I was working with social workers, implementing behavioral plans. But I just love that work. And I did that for 2 years and then moved into some other, but I don't want to keep rambling.
Well, can I ask you a question about that job? I mean, because, there's a lot of questions. First, were the people at the school a little confused with why you were there? Like when you first started, I'm sure they were happy to have you, this young guy, smart, able to help out in different ways. But did they ask you questions like, what's going on? Right?
Yeah, I was pretty, I was pretty guarded about who I was, I mean, I didn't want to tell them, I'm an attorney. And I was 30 and most of the people working there were in their early 20s. But, of course you meet people there, people who are still friends of mine, and they begin to know your background. And then, so word gets out that you're an attorney there. And so, it was sort of a curiosity for them as to why I was there.
Did you ever make it to Alaska?
Ian, I've never made it to Alaska, and I'm hoping to go. The diocese in Fairbanks used to pay for priests. They would pay your ticket, and you would fly to Fairbanks, and they would you get off the plane, and then they would bring you to this hut and give you a survival suit, and then an Inuit would come up, and you'd get on a snowmobile, and he'd get on a snowmobile, and he would lead you out to this village for a week. So that sounded really exciting. When I was at the conference, I had the opportunity to do that, but I I had a meeting that I couldn't move, so I never got there. But another Jesuit I worked with went out there. So I still hope to make it, but I never made it there. I made it as far as Puget Sound in Washington.
Puget Sound in Washington. I remember this is, a side story. In Minnesota, I met the former bishop of Fairbanks, Alaska, who then became bishop in St. Cloud, Minnesota. And you know how he got around in Alaska? It wasn't via snowmobile, which is awesome. I bet he used one every now and then. He would fly on the planes delivering Coca-Cola to the different villages. Wow. You would just hop a ride with the guys delivering soda to the different villages.
Were there polar bears too?
I don't think the polar bears were the pilots. Maybe there were passengers in the back of the plane. I don't know if they know the commercials here. The polar bear Christmas commercials. We hope to see some soon. So that is really an odyssey, I think, of sorts, of like this journey of like shedding New Orleans, right? Of this place where you spent your whole life.
Yeah.
And entering something completely unknown.
That's right. It was great because I had a lot of friends in New Orleans, well-intentioned, but they were all had ideas about what I needed to do, Right. And what I needed to do was just get away, be by myself, and try and figure it out, on my own. Now, at the time, I wasn't thinking in terms of my vocation, which would come a few years later. But then looking back, you see how God is working in all of this, right? Leading me into a quiet space, a place of more reflection, giving me experiences of poor and marginalized people to sort of work on my heart. So, yeah, I was there 2 years. And then, then I began to say, well, I love this work, but how do I work with these children at a little higher level? In other words, can I be the one writing the behavior plans instead of implementing them? So I looked for a program to do that would pay me to go back to grad school, and that was a program called Boys Hope, Girls Hope in St. Louis.
St. Louis, yeah.
So that's really where the faith component came in, because the children were, if they had a faith tradition, we brought to their church, and then the Catholic children would come to the Catholic church. So we went I started bringing these children to a Catholic church in the inner city there in St. Louis. And the priest was incredible. He had a good message. And more than that, the presence of the church in that neighborhood was extensive, right? So community garden, community outreach, advocacy on justice issues, soup kitchen. So I began, it's silly to say, but I was like, gosh, I've never seen the church involved in these things. What's the church getting involved in this for? Not knowing that, this part and parcel of what we're supposed to be. Yeah. So I was deeply moved by that. And with that came the thought, as I was studying, what do I really want to study that doesn't have any ambition to it in the sense of it's going to give me this degree and assure me of this salary, but something that's really going to help me answer some questions that have been lingering with me and burdening me for a while. And that was, what do I believe? Do I believe anymore? I had worked with a lot of people in Wyoming who were non-believers, right? And
doing great work of self.
Exactly. But they would make disparaging remarks sometimes about Christianity, and I would find myself taking umbrage, but then I would say, well, why do you care? It's not like you're practicing your faith. So I wanted to dig deeper on that. So I started, instead of getting the MSW, I started studying Scripture at St. Louis University. And that combination of studying Scripture, working with these kids, bringing them to a really lively parish, all of that started coming together. Yeah. And then the question became, wow, how do I live these scriptures in the most profound way that I can? I was almost 34 at the time, and I said, well, clearly that's not priesthood. So I looked at, and Dan will know this from St. Louis, but the Karen House, which is a homeless shelter Catholic worker home. And I said, I'll go there, and I can live simply, continue to study theology, and work with the poor. And that sort of sparked for me, and I stayed with that thought the last months that I was finishing at Boys Hope, Girls Hope, finishing my contract. But as time got closer, I said, this is close, but I want something, I don't know how to put it, but a little more structured maybe. Something just didn't quite feel right. And as wonderful as the people were there, and I still hold them in such high respect for their dedication and commitment. But then the idea came one day, honestly, it was sort of like the thought came to my mind, what about being a Jesuit? And sort of shook it off, and I said, that's the craziest thing I've ever thought of because of my age, because of sort of the life that I lived, the ways in which I had not practiced my faith, had not even stepped in a church for most of my 20s. And I said, that's just, to even think that they would accept me or that I would be fit for that. So then I would say, yeah, okay, go on with your life. But that thought kept coming back to me, what about being a Jesuit? What about, and I just couldn't figure out why, and I know you can relate to this, but, so many really good people can put it out of their mind pretty easily. People who admire the Jesuits or admire religious life or priests, they say, yeah, that's a great way of life. It's not for me. Yeah. And I would say to myself, yeah, me either. But I couldn't put it out of my mind. And it began to really eat at me, when this went on for a couple of months. And I thought, well, I don't want to be the age I am now and not, and bitter because I couldn't commit to something because I thought I was supposed to be a Jesuit. I'd rather put this question behind me, thinking they would bounce me pretty quickly.
They would make the decision for you.
Yeah. So I entered, and
you were 35 at the time?
34. I entered,
34.
yeah, 34.
Okay.
So I entered, and it's there were 9 of us who entered, and that first night, as you know, you go around telling your vocation story, and I thought, oh man, I am the odd man out, because everyone had such compelling stories of faith, and I felt like I was there to just answer this question that had been nagging me. But that was 25 years ago, and it's been a fantastic journey. You name some of the things I've been able to do. It's not really what I've been able to do. I just consider it such a blessing, the people I've been able to meet, the ways that have touched my life and helped me grow as a Christian, as a person. It's just been phenomenal. So anyway.
Yeah, well, I would say your story, your that first night of faith sharing, or the first 3 days when we all tell our vocation story, to drop everything and drive to Alaska, even though you never got it. But that's incredible, and to stay for 2 years doing this work that is invisible to a lot of people's eyes, but is so important to work with these, the kind of kids that you were working with. Yeah, so. It's a great story. I've never heard the full story, or it's not the full story, but I've never heard that much of it before. So that's great.
Yeah, and I have heard some of it, but one of the things I remember hearing a part of your story was when you were in the DA's office, and kind of, I think what led you to leave the DA's office, or it was a case that came forward. It was a capital case, I think.
There were a couple there, yeah, and I don't want to make too much of my time, because I was not a long-term assistant district attorney, but it impacted me in tremendous ways, impacted me. And so a couple of things, Dan, about my time there that still, let me jump ahead. When I was a DA, and then when I entered the Jesuits as a novice, we go out on experiment, and my novice master said, good, I'm going to send you to live in public housing in New Orleans. And I said, no, you don't understand, I can't do that, And he said, no, this will be really good for you. And I said, no, but I've been prosecuting people from that neighborhood, putting them in jail. He said, no, this will be really good for you. And honestly, I was so scared the first day, because I was working in this literacy program, and I had to walk home by myself through the housing development, and nothing happened, of course, nothing happened. But beginning to see the world through the eyes. Look, there were a lot of issues in that part of town. It's not that I discovered that it was, Eden, but I guess that's the gift of a Jesuit life, I think, and our formation is learning to see the world through the eyes of other people. Learning to see the world through the eyes of Belizeans here, right? And the struggles of some of the people here. It really alters the way you see things. Right. But the two things, Dan, that I would say that you're probably one I think you're referring to is, there was a guy named, a pretty sure all these years later I remember his name correctly, but it was James Brooks, and he had been convicted 5 times for murder. So he was serving 5 life sentences, and they were trying him again so that they could get death penalty. So in other words, in Louisiana, you do the trial in 2 phases: the guilt or innocence on the crime, and then if you find him guilty, then you do a second phase as to whether or not someone should be put to death. And that time it was the electrical chair. And I had a case coming up. It was going to be my first degree murder, so I was going to be arguing that someone should be put to death. And they say the unexamined life is not worth living, and I think so many people don't examine. I mean, I had never really sat down and confronted that question, even when I joined the office. Can I argue for someone's death? So I figured, well, I better at least go watch a trial, so I know how to do this. I've never tried a death penalty case. So anyway, I went to watch this guy James Brooks, who was. He was about as bad a guy as you can imagine in terms of his, he'd killed. They were trying him for the 6th time, and it was pretty clear that he had killed a lot of people. He had been shot. His deal was he liked to sneak up on people in City Park and rob them, and while they were in their car. And one night when he did that, he was shot. And so from then on, he didn't take any chances. He just shot first when he went approached people. Okay, so here he is being tried a 6th time. I go to watch the case. He's found guilty. They do the death penalty phase. And during the trial, he was as awful to people as he could be. So, one that stands out, one of the people who was shot, the boyfriend was killed, the girlfriend survived, so she was testifying, and he started yelling at her. And it was just this really intense scene and she was crying and he's yelling at her, and you're thinking, God, she suffered so much and he's still yelling at her. So I'm trying to just give you a flavor for the fact that I had no sympathy for this guy at all. At the end of it, they convicted him and said, you should die in the electric chair. And when the judge reads those instructions and reads the jury verdict out, it's sort of like in the movies, right? With the gavel, he said, "May God have mercy on your soul." And I just remember thinking, well, this is such a huge mistake. And I didn't reason my way to that. I just felt it in that moment. I thought, as awful as this guy was, this doesn't solve anything. Maybe someone else wouldn't feel that way, but I know for me, I just felt like, wow, I could never argue for someone's death because it doesn't solve things. So that was one instance in which, I really felt like that and some other things. I began to have questions, particularly when I started in the juvenile section about, I'd be convicting kids, arguing for cases for someone to be convicted of, it's his 12th car theft. And I just thought, how do we get to it before it gets to this? Right. And that's what I wanted to be a part of, right? Trying to address this. Yeah. So what difference does it make to put another conviction, something else on his rap sheet? How do you help this kid avoid being here? And most of the time in Louisiana, when you would get these rap sheets, you could get this. The first part of the rap sheet would tell you if they had been adjudicated a victim of abuse and neglect. And about 80% of these kids were, right? So, these are people that line about give people a second chance. But my experience was, a lot of people never get a first chance.
Right.
And so how does that relate to today? I guess what I love most of all is trying to work with people to give them a first chance or a second chance in whatever that is, not just the criminal justice system, but in any walk of life, in our educational institutions.
And I know that's a real life question for Dan and I in the work that we've been doing at the prison, which you know about, and tell you about. And you, of course, are familiar with Belize Central Prison as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, right? Especially, I think, here in Belize when there's not a lot of wraparound services, there's not a lot of infrastructure to be able to provide some of those supports. So,
Yeah.
definitely interested in how we, as church, right, as the people of God, can help go about that. But we do want to go on to your just to talk a little bit about your time here in Belize, of course.
Great.
And you were the superior here at the Jesuit community, and I just want to ask, what do you love about Belize, and what gifts do you think the Belizean church gives to the world? Kind of big, broad stroke questions. But.
Right. Wow, what do I love about Belize? How much time do we have? No, I've said this to both of you and to anyone who'll listen. For me, this is the best assignment in the UCS province. I mean, this is it's an incredible place, and I just regret that I didn't have more time to spend here. Hopefully, I can come back. But anyway, in my 3 years here, the faith is alive, and I know that many Belizeans I talk to now have some, concerns about the diminishment maybe of the faith in terms of the people attending Mass and whatnot. And those are legitimate concerns. But I find in so many ways here, the faith is so alive and the people are so good. I was ordained maybe 12 years when I came here. And, or 10, somewhere in there. What we're told after you're ordained is the people of God will teach you how to be a priest, and they will pull priesthood out of you. And I didn't really understand that till I came here, and really the people here pull priesthood out of you, and they teach you, they form you. And I just became a better preacher when I was here, a better presider, a better pastoral ministry. There's so many moments outside of the church here that are sacramental for me, conversations with people, visits with people, anointings. I don't even know where to start on that question. So my hope for the Church of Belize is I've been incredibly consoled by the ordinations of 2 young Belizeans the last 2 years, I believe, and more to come. So I think that's a really positive sign. My hope is that we can continue to develop the lay leadership of the church in Belize, because our Jesuit brother Karl Rahner said, in the future every Christian will become a mystic, or Christianity will disappear. And what I take from that is, everybody's got to take ownership of the faith. Not just priests, not just brothers, not just sisters, but all of us have to take responsibility for the faith.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think particularly what you're saying about the faith being alive, I think there is a sense in which, if you walk into St. Martin's, 9 a.m. on Sunday, it's just alive, or 7 p.m. There's a vibrancy that I don't think should be taken for granted, because I think coming from an American context where you can walk into a church, and I like to joke, there's like a 10-foot radius rule, this is before COVID.
COVID rules, pre-COVID.
And we're all very grim, and, we're just here to be here. And I think that is one of the gifts that Belize has. There's just a vibrancy here.
Yeah.
So I think that's well said. Well, let's talk a little bit about what your role now is, because it's for people who aren't in the church world, or even people who are in the church world, knowing what a provincial is, what that means, what that entails for you. And this is your 3rd year in the job?
3rd year, yeah. 3rd year, and should be 6 years, so almost halfway through.
Okay.
So,
not that you're going.
No, I really, well, I've said this to you all. I enjoy being provincial. All things considered, I'd rather be back at Belize, but I've been asked to do this, and I'm very happy to do it, because we have so many great Jesuits and great colleagues carrying the mission of the Society of Jesus. So what do? Well, we have 12 states. This is, this, but this is for your audience. But so sort of New Mexico to Florida, up to Missouri, to Colorado, then Belize and Puerto Rico. So I spend my year, 320 Jesuits more or less, I spend my year visiting each of those states, every school that we have, every university, every parish, retreat house, any other Jesuit work that we have. I visit all the Jesuits. I hear their account of conscience. Meaning I visit with them for about an hour and hear how the Lord is active in their life, and that really helps me know, is this a good assignment for them? Do we need a new assignment? Is it time to move to a new assignment? So that's the biggest part of the job. Is making those visits. That's why I'm here right now, visiting with the Jesuits. And of course, you visit with the board chairs and the directors of the work, and hopefully squeeze in a little visit with the people of God and some of the other friends you make along the way. It's a lot of administration. It's a lot of paperwork, and you write letters and reports on each of these visits. It's a lot of meetings and looking at budgets and finances. These days, more and more, particularly in the U.S., it's a lot of legal questions. Now, we have incredible lawyers. I don't do the legal work, and we're much better off for that. But with the background I have, I do get more involved in that, perhaps, in terms of the discussions that we have. So, yeah, that's essentially what it is, sort of keeping, stepping out of the sort of the vineyard, so to speak, and getting behind a desk and keeping things running for the Jesuits for the province for 6 years.
Getting behind a desk and maybe even getting behind the steering wheel to travel to all those places, or in an airplane.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're probably on the move. Maybe half the year?
No, it's more than that. I want to add it up because I think it's probably between 275 and 300 days a year.
Wow, that's incredible.
So what status do you have on the airlines? Is it a gold?
Thanks for asking. It's a tremendous achievement. I'm Premier 1K.
Wow. I've never.
Would you mind addressing me that way?
Premier 1K, Provincial Tom Greene.
I want that in the catalog.
Premier 1K. So on the road a lot, and I would imagine it's a gift to, you see the whole entire province, right? Which very few people see the entire province in their lifetimes, right? And so you get to visit every community, every apostolic work. I imagine that's just pretty cool to kind of have that. And that's the importance of your job, is you have the big picture view. Right?
Yeah, that's right. What's great is you have the external big picture view, right? So SJC is doing a great job here. St. Louis University is doing a great job. Strake Jesuit High School in Houston. So the externals, right? The scores are high. The retreat programs are strong. But in our governance, there's all this also the interior aspect. So I get to know you and all these Jesuits at a privileged level, right? And so I not only know the struggles or the burdens perhaps you're carrying, but also get to know the joys. And part of it for me is, gosh, if the world could use this system of governance, because I have a privileged insight into the Jesuits of the province that I never had before, because I get to know, what's going on. And that is just so helpful for me in understanding the man, knowing the best assignment for him, knowing, how far can I push him and challenge him? Is this a time where, no, he doesn't need to be challenged. We need to put him in a ministry that can help him, what's the word? That can be consoling for him. Sometimes you want, I know you know this, for myself too, I've been put in jobs at ministries, it's like, whew, this is really a stretch. Yeah. But then I grow a lot in it. Yeah. But then sometimes I've needed to move into a ministry that's just more sort of in my sweet spot, and do that for a few years. So I guess just to answer your question, that it is a great privilege getting to know the province at that level, the works, but also the men, the Jesuits.
I'd imagine.
And, maybe shifting back here for a penultimate question, looking at the church here in Belize, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but just, when you look at the church here in Belize, what are some challenges that you see, and, how can the church, and maybe more specifically the Jesuits and our lay partners, how can we respond to those challenges?
Yeah, I get asked this question a fair bit about Belize, but about, any city that I'm in or any, and I've really come to see that it's multifaceted, right? That you have to take care of your base, right? So you're good, what I'm going to call you're good, loyal Catholic base. You got to take care of those people, right? You got to have good preaching for them. You got to have good opportunities for them, right? And so you always need to take care of your base. But then there's what are our responsibilities to the other? I don't know what it would be, 50, 60% of the people in Belize, particularly those on the margins, and that's the balance you need to have. You can't just go all out into that ministry, right, and abandon your base. You got to take care of your base. But I would love to see the Society of Jesus, as much as the church in Belize, continue to look at how to work with marginalized groups. We've been so successful in education, and there's nothing to be ashamed of with that. I mean, we've sort of taken, a lot of first generation families in the U.S. context, and first generation families, I would imagine here in Belize too, and educated them, and then they want that education for their sons and daughters. But the thing is, you just keep going up the ladder, and somebody's got to come down the ladder and start where we were at the beginning. So I guess what I'm really pushing the Jesuits to do, and I would apply this to the church in Belize, is to get back re-engaged with the poor and the marginalized and those people, whatever those groups are, right? Whoever the lepers are these days, whoever the outcasts are. So I feel like, and I've said this at formation gatherings, if we don't, we neglect the poor at our own risk. And I really think it puts the Society of Jesus at risk if we're not doing more and actively seeking ways in which we can engage with the poor and suffering of this world, whether they are not just Catholics, but any groups. So take care of your base, take care of the poor, we'll be okay.
Wonderful. Now, I know we've asked, we've kind of lobbed up questions to you so far, but for our final question, traditionally, it is the hardest hitting question. And I think for you,
all right, give me a minute.
This question has the potential to really make Belizeans love you, or I don't want to say hate, might be a strong word, but really you might rub them the wrong way in this episode. They might walk away with a bad taste in their mouth, so to speak. So our final question, everyone.
Hit me.
New Orleans rice and beans or Belizean rice and beans? And you need to you need to qualify this.
Okay, that's hitting below the belt. So
I know.
All right. So let me think for a second. Here's what I'm going to say on that. Number one, great minds think alike. So New Orleans and Belize, they think alike, right? Rice and beans. So great minds think alike.
Ingratiate yourself with the audience.
Yeah.
And then, so I also want to say my mother's rice and beans, number one.
Okay.
All right. And then I'm going to go, please don't show this in New Orleans, but I'm going to go Belize rice and beans.
Wow.
Yeah. With Marie Sharp. And,
wow.
And
okay. Is it the oil? It's the coconut
sauce.
oil that does it for you?
Yeah, it's that. It's New Orleans is a little different, the red beans and rice.
Yeah,
It's sort of like stew beans here, but But yeah, the coconut does it. That that onion. What is it? The onion vinegar. And then a little Marie Sharp.
Yeah. Wow.
By the way, does Miss Norris watch this show?
I think she does.
Because that's the best food in Belize.
Dude,
that's the best food in Belize.
Shout out. All right. Well, usually we all answer the final question, but I think we'll just leave this one to Tom. I think this sticks to Tom.
Yeah, we're gonna have only one person anger
Yeah, that's right. But all right. Well, Miss Norris, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and everyone else, thank you for joining us. We want to thank you, Tom, for being with us, Father Tom Greene, and your short visit here. You fit in Magis talk, and we're very grateful. And so have a safe trip back. And for all of you who are watching us on Facebook or YouTube, if you have any questions or comments or topics you'd like us to talk about or guests you'd like us to interview, please let us know in the comment section. If you're listening to us on the radio, thank you, and we'll see you next week.